The committee of the whole, please come to order. We are on standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 173, which is the substitute bill. Further discussion, Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I bring up the sales and tax. Or do we have more than one subject in a bill? And is that constitutional? Is this a tax with inside this? So I believe we shouldn't have that in here.
Further discussion.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know, if you look at the title of the bill, it's school finance. And certainly the tax is going entirely to education. I think it's constitutional, but I'm not a scholar, so on that subject, but I would stand for any more questions.
Further discussion, Representative Stivar. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so if I could get the good presenter of this amendment to help me understand, it appears like we kind of have, just trying to sort it out, and if you can correct this for me, is we may all have ideas on what is we like and don't like on the bill. And we have an opportunity on 2 avenues to do this. One is the bill, and one is the substitute bill that we're now debating. And it appears to me, after listening and watching, that even though there are fewer cuts in the amended bill, the substitute bill, that's probably the best vehicle to make any changes to education through amendments or otherwise, and allow us to move forward in a manner that avoids litigation and other. Am I getting that right?
Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And that's correct. The base bill 173 does reductions, kind of, you might say, across the board reductions. They're not cost based. And what 173, the substitute bill, does is it looks at the components and the elements that are in there, I believe, are constitutional reductions. Are there others that are constitutional? Probably. That's the conversation we need to have. That's the vehicle we have to discuss what we want to do with education funding. You know, do we want to tax? Don't want to tax. Do we want to move revenues? Don't want to move revenues. Do we want further reductions or not? That's the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman's prerogative here. We're going to just do a privilege of the floor. Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, privilege of the floor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, this would be in our South Gallery. I've got a couple of Sheridan County folks. One of them is Deb Wetland. She is on the community college board. She's an excellent trustee. And of course, her husband is Anthony Wetland, who's probably one of the best attorneys in the state of Wyoming. So if we could just give him a round of applause, it'd be awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for making the trip. Welcome to the People's House. Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call a Rules Committee to discuss if this is germane, if it's 2 separate subjects in this bill.
Okay, the House will stand at ease till the sound of the gavel. Yeah, members of the Rules Committee, if you'll just join us up here. Thank you. The House will come back to order. We'll continue discussion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 173, which is a substitute bill. Representative Stivar.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna pull my request for Rules Committee and bring it back later.
Thank you. The motion has been withdrawn. Further discussion on the bill. On the amendment, sorry, substitute bill. Representative Hallinan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to announce that I'm going to withdraw my comments about defeating this amendment. I think that the good majority leader has been convincing to me, and I think this is the best bill that we can do to address the cuts that we need. And I just wanted to announce that for everybody to know that. Thank you.
Appreciate the clarification. Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I'd like to bring this discussion to a head here because we're debating the merits of the bills. And really what we should be discussing here is which of these two bills do we want? Do we want the main bill or do we want the substitute bill? So let me give you some clarification on that. I've gone through and studied the two bills, and this is what I've been able to ascertain. Both bills have, I'm referring to the notes that the bringer of the bill gave to us. Both bills have the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund Investment Earnings Program in them. Both bills have the severance tax, looking on page 2. Both bills have the sales and use tax increases and the estimates at the bottom. So page 2 is all consistent. So the only difference between the substitute bill and the primary bill is this. The primary bill carries forth a $66 million, which is actually translated into the spreadsheet to be $48 million actual cuts. So that has a lump sum based on the ADM. That's what the original bill has. The substitute bill takes it a step further and actually earmarks those specific components in the model and attributes money to each of those adjustments. So which one is best? I would submit to you that the lump sum number is going to be difficult to support in a court of law because it's not based on actual experiences, what it cost. What does it cost to run our education system? It's relatively a random number that's just a cut. So I recommend that we support the amendment, which is to use the substitute bill number 1. Now, to those of you that may be inclined, you're looking at the bottom of the spreadsheet, and for those of you that think you want to see more cuts, and so you're inclined to vote for 173, which would be a no vote on the amendment, this is what I'd submit to you. I would encourage you to vote aye on the amendment. Let's use a substitute bill. And I've already gone through the processes of analyzing the components. On second reading, I'll bring you a laundry list of different ways that you can increase the cuts to education if that's your privilege. Whatever the number, I assure you there's many, and you can pick and choose and just work through that to come up with a dollar amount that you're comfortable with. Those of you that do not want to see education cut, you can vote no on any of those amendments. Those of you that want to see higher numbers. So in other words, don't be concerned about that 9.8 million. We can adjust that on the second reading amendment. So I think we can get back on the merits of the bill if we just choose the substitute bill number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really appreciated those comments from my colleague on committee number 2. And I am in support of this amendment, but I have a question. As a consequence of being put on recalibration, I spent all summer trying to understand all of the components of the model. And as I go through this amended bill, I'm having a difficult time comparing the changes to the model in the bill to what the components were in the legislative model and the evidence-based model before. And I'm wondering, is there a document that would help me understand that better? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the standing committee amendment, which is a substitute bill. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge a no vote on this amendment. I don't want to belabor this, but some of the arguments we've heard that, well, why don't we just use this as the base bill, a substitute bill, and work up? I would say, well, why not the other way around? Why don't we use the 3.5% and work down? And frankly, since I've been here, it's been the other way around, which is that we're always working up. The presumption is that everything that is done to get controls on this is somehow unconstitutional, which is the presumption that the bringer of this amendment seemed to suggest. And, one of the reasons when I ran for reelection, I really wanted to try to, with the 4 years I've been here, to try to break through some of the premises that I think are flawed. And I think this argument that, well, this is the only constitutional way, and every single time that this body tries to reduce anything substantial, that somehow this body is doing something unconstitutional. These cases have tremendous flaws in them that are not discussed too much on this floor. One is that there's no remedy. What is, supposing that the court does say that one of the reductions in their opinion has constitutional problems. So what happens then? And nobody really has this answer. Do they take over this whole thing because it's on autopilot, and are they going to institute a wrong-headed tax increase, a judicially created tax increase, which has never happened in our country's history, let alone all of our 50 states' histories? There's no remedy on these decisions. There is the reality. And the reality is we're the elected representatives of the state of Wyoming. We appropriate the funds, and we need to discuss what is the proper allocation of funding without everything being considered unconstitutional. It becomes a catch-all argument that isn't reflected in the actual meat of these reductions. So just to say, well, this is the only constitutional approach, I think is the wrong way to go. Say that this substitute bill is the only constitutional approach. That's the flawed premise that I think we've approached this issue on since I've been here. And I would say, why don't we do it the other way around? Why don't we work down? You can work the other way. A representative from House District 21, bring it the other way around. The list of things that you could do to reverse the reductions, rather than us do what we've done the last 4 years, which frankly, I don't think has worked, which is to say we're going to work up on reductions. So I'd urge a no vote on this. I think there's, let's try to back away from some of the premises that we've gotten to in the past, which are suppositions that I don't think are based in the reality of these decisions or the actual constitutional findings that have been made by the court in the past. So I'd urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you. That great debate here for the 30th recognition. Representative Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment, and this is my first time to speak. 6 years I was a trustee, and I also served 4 years on the Education Committee. And I can tell you that my first year as a trustee, my mindset was very similar to many in the room. I just thought there was a simple fix to our education funding woes. But you soon find out that that is not the case. It's very complex. And I think about my uncle, my husband's uncle, who was a superintendent for Goshen County in the 70s or the 80s. This was prior to recapture. And the price of oil fell to, I think, about $12 a barrel. And he, as a trustee or as a superintendent, had to make the decisions about how do you manage a district when you're funding, just your knees are cut out. And he made the decision to close schools. And so it changed the face of education in Wyoming. And there are a lot of schools that don't exist anymore in Wyoming because of that time. There are schools that are closed in my neck of the woods. And we have districts, we have consolidated districts today that are a result of that. And so we could make these cuts and would mean closing some schools. And I can assure you it'll be our rural schools. And then what do? Do we bus our children? Is that equitable? It's not. And so that's what I mean about complexities. It's not a simple answer. It's not, but we're asking those questions. And this education committee, they kick those questions around throughout the interim. And so I would urge you to continue to be a part of the conversation. Join those committee meetings, listen to the conversation, join the debate, and the same with appropriations. It's not simple. This is a start. So on and for the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill has a lot of moving parts in it, and it's really easy to find something in here that you don't like. It would be really easy to find an excuse to vote no on this bill. I'm on and for the amendment and on and for the bill. What happens if we vote no on the amendment? We vote no on the amendment, then we go back to the original bill 173. If we vote no on 173, what happens? We lose any opportunity that we might have to make any changes because we will be funding education at the current level. We will not have an opportunity to address the structural deficit. We will not have an opportunity to look forward to another source of revenue at all. So a no vote will leave us right exactly where we are right now. We'll be funding education exactly as we are today. So on one side, I hear that folks say, I'm going to vote no on this bill because it has cuts in it, cuts to education. I can't support any cuts to education. On the other hand, I hear people say, the cuts are not deep enough. I can't vote for a bill that doesn't have bigger cuts in it. And then I hear people say, I can't vote for a bill that has any kind of a tax in it. So they say that politics brings strange bedfellows. There's a perfect example of it. People that are diametrically opposed to the bill for one reason or the other reason, if they vote collectively, this bill dies. And we're back exactly where we are today. So I'm urging you to vote aye on the amendment and aye on the bill.
Representative Schwartz? No? Okay, we have any other discussion on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 173? Okay, question having been called, all those in favor of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 173, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill, which is now the substitute bill. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'd like to move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 173, substitute number 1, and ask for your favorable consideration. And the good country lawyer, the new good country lawyer, he saw an issue on page 61 where unintentionally I'd stricken out a revenue stream where a revenue stream was going for a period of years. And you can see that strikeout. So this is the 1% severance is actually headed to the OPSTA account until June 30th, 2022. And so, and what the original language, the language you see in the bill does is it moves 2/3 on towards the permanent mineral trust fund does not hold it up in the OPSTA account through June 30th, 2022. I didn't want to change any existing law that way. So what this does is just simply revert that and say that two-thirds of that severance will stay in that OPSTA account through June 30th, 2022, like it was in current law. And then it would move to the permanent mental trust fund as normal. So this is just a cleanup, unintentional on my part.
Discussion. Okay, question having been called on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 173. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Majority Floor Leader Summers. We have a second. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will respectfully withdraw the amendment.
Thank you. For those that didn't hear, the amendment has been withdrawn. We are back on the bill. Any other discussion? Question having been called. All those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion that when the committee of whole rises to report, that we do so with the recommendation that House Bill 173 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, the bill has passed. We are on the next bill. Oh yeah, House Bill 173 is passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 174. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 174, sponsored by House Education, Local Government Sales and Use Taxes, an act relating to sales and use taxes. Mr. Speaker, your committee number for education, to whom is referred House Bill 174, Local Government Sales and Use Taxes, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Brown, Connolly, Harshman, Obermueller, Paxton, Summers. Noes, Representatives Andrew, Nyman, Newsom. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
Thank you. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Paxton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Bill 174 do pass. And I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendment and turn the explanation of the bill over to the good former Speaker.
Thank you, Chairman Paxton. Chairman Harshman for the Standing Committee amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just probably talk about them both here, but I want to, first, members, I just would like you, if you could just turn to the last page of the bill, page 12. And then, and section 3, I think is really, it's going to say a lot about this bill, and then we can, there's some other nuances, but so I'll just give you a second pause there. Okay, sorry for my confusion. I have a committee of the whole amendment that will delete the standing committee amendment, but it's either way, it's fine. But I want to just, so if you go to section 3, line 8 on page 12, and this is where the standing committee amendment is at. This bill is linked then to House Bill 61, the original recalibration bill, and the standing committee amendment links it to 61 or 173. The bill that we just passed on committee of the whole. And so I think we can just take a quick vote on that. I think vote aye on that. We'll clean it up in a committee of the whole amendment. So I'd call for the question on the standing committee amendment.
Okay, you have heard the motion on the standing committee amendment and the question having been called. All those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 174, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so members, really now we try to link this bill to 173 and it's all about sales tax. And where does sales tax go? 70% to the state, 30% to the locals. It's their key revenue stream, particularly for cities and towns. And so Wyoming, we have our average sales tax rate is 5.4%. That's 44th out of 46 states. Now there's 45 states actually have sales tax in the District of Columbia. So we're 44th out of 46 that have it. As you know, like Montana, Washington State, those that don't have a sales tax, but they have high property taxes and they have income taxes. And so Wyoming, we've traditionally relied then on really, 3 types of taxes, right? Income, sales tax, and property tax. And we've relied just on 2 of those legs. And it's been a real blessing. We don't have an income tax. And so we have the 5th lowest property tax because minerals pay half our property tax and we pay, we're the 44th out of 46. It's been a real blessing. Last time the sales tax was raised was 2004. It was actually raised in the 90s and then it was set to expire a couple times. And the legislature took a couple different votes on that where the statewide sales tax went from 3 cents to its current 4 cents. I think it was 2002 or 3 or 4 when it was finally made permanent. So this bill that we just voted on talks about a penny for education would be a 5th statewide sales tax. So then what do we do with local governments? And we don't want to cause a problem when we're trying to solve a problem. And so that's why this bill is before you today, and education work this bill with local governments. We ask those groups to come together and try to bring us a solution. Okay, so Mr. Chairman, quickly, really what this does, if you'll flip over to page 2, whenever you talk about sales and use tax, the same language is repeated twice. When it's 3915, that is sales tax. 3916 then will be use tax. But this paragraph J on page 2 is really about the current local, what we call a 5th penny, would then, if this all goes into play down the road and oil doesn't come back and we have to use this insurance policy, then this penny, this first local penny becomes permanent. There's 3 local pennies out there. And then this first one would become permanent and it would become a permanent statewide penny. And I think we're going to have, an option for counties to back out of that if they want. Currently, 21 of the 23 counties institute that first local penny. Okay, the distribution is going to stay the same. So, Mr. Chairman, go over to page 3. The distribution stays the same. And then as you move through this, really, I guess I'll just make this really simple. The first local penny is permanent. The second local penny is by a vote of the county commissioners or the public. And the third penny is a vote of the public. And really, that's it. And that's really current law right now. A little bit different. The 5th penny, really, once it's voted in, the county commission can continue to reauthorize that without a vote of the people. Most county commissions, though, send it to a vote. This would allow a vote of the people as well, but it also allow the county commissioners. So really, I don't want to, if there's questions, we're basically adding a penny to the thing. If we add this 5th statewide penny for education, we want to allow the locals to keep their pennies moving forward as well. That's all it is. Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for any questions.
All right, we're on committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 74. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, for the bringer of the bill, I just want to make sure I understand what the bill does. It looks like it's a 1 cent sales tax increase, but it seems like it does get distributed to cities, counties, and towns. there on the page in subsection, this new subsection R. And so my question is, why is this tied to House Bill 173? I guess I'm not understanding, I'm obviously not understanding the big picture here. So if you could tell me again how this all works together. Thank you.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think our cities and counties, obviously, we've got a couple issues in our general fund budget. We passed the lodging tax to move the Department of Tourism out of the general fund, 25 million a biennium. That's going to help our general fund. We've got local governments, 110 million a biennium. And we did that back in 2005. So only two of us were here then, the food tax. And we said, hey, we'll make it up. Local government said, please don't do this. This is a lot of our revenue. We said, we will make it up to you. And now we're finding it harder and harder. We got bills now to cut that. And so how do we, now we're talking about doing a fifth penny statewide for education. How will that affect your local town of Rock Springs now that's relied on the fifth penny? And that's what we're trying to come to a solution with those local governments that say, hey, your fifth penny can be permanent if you want it to be. Your county commissioners can vote it in, or they can go to the people. And that's what we're trying to do with that. And so really that's it, because if we solve the school issue and then 23 counties say, well, we don't want that fifth penny, then what are we going to do for locals? We're gonna have to do something. They're going to come to us. And so we don't want to solve one problem and create another. And so we're trying to move this thing forward, and that's it. And link those, because those two issues are linked together. And so that's why we bring it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are on committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 174. Representative Wharf.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I hate to show my ignorance, but I understand the bill we worked just before had a penny increase. And this one talks about a penny increase. Is that 2 pennies that we just increased? I'd ask for some clarification, please.
Chairman Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, so, and I'll use some visuals. So right now you have 4 statewide pennies and 3 local pennies. And if both of these bills passed and the LSRA drops to 650, you would have 5 statewide pennies and still have 3 local pennies. That's what we're trying to do here. And this first local penny, which currently goes out to an election, and if it's voted in, the county commission can keep reinstituting that without ever voting again. We would make that first local penny a vote of the county commission. Or your commission could say, yeah, but we want to send it to the voters, either one. But the commission could say, yes, we want this. Second penny, this is a vote of the commission as well, or they could send it out to people. The third penny, vote of the people. So we take these 3 local pennies. If this happens, this is permanent, vote of the commission, vote of the people. But all 3 of these could be a vote of the people. It's really up to your county commission. But they would move from the current 7 to 8. Now, keep in mind, there is no local government that has instituted this. It's never happened. This community has 6. Gotta be careful which ones I'm holding up. I've never done this before like this, but I feel a little goofy, frankly. And I'm on the YouTube. Forgive me back home. So that's it. We've never instituted the 3rd local penny ever in this state. And I don't think there'll be any rush to do that. But if we somehow have to institute that 5th penny, 4 or 5 years from now, oil doesn't rebound, investment returns go down, and we're going to still keep the state rolling, we would have to move from the 44th out of 46 states. Add an extra penny would move us to 30th out of 46 states. We'd still be lower than everybody around us, except for Montana, of course, is 0. Right? So it's not like we'd be in the top 5. And we're hoping it doesn't happen. But it's that insurance policy that the majority floor leader talked about. And I think, because really we got two stools. And nobody wants to do this property tax thing. You talk to your constituents, they're like, no way. And keep in mind, we are paying the lowest number of mills in modern state history. Average mills are 68 across the state. There's no more bonding for schools. We used to pay 75, 80 mills. We lost 3 mills during school reform in the late 90s, school finance reform. So we are paying the lowest number of mills, lowest statewide property tax in modern history. Now, values of our homes have gone up. Hey, that's the way it works. But if you want to go to South Dakota, it'll double. Your sales tax in South Dakota statewide will be a couple pennies higher as well, and Colorado and all of them. So, thank you.
Thank you. Just a correction here. I guess the committee, the whole amendment number 1 has not been moved, so we're on the bill. Representative Banks.
Thank you. Just another question on that 5-cent tax, Representative Harshman. So a county like mine does already have a 5-cent tax that has been implemented by the county commission, essentially made permanent. Does this just if that insurance policy, so to speak, goes into effect, then that just ratchets everything up 1. So then we go from 5 to 6. It doesn't impact that 5th that's already made permanent.
Thank you, Chairman Harshman.
Correct. It would not impact that. He is correct.
Okay, further discussion on the bill. Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question with raising this and adding these in. Does that mean that we will or will not drop the supplemental we give to the towns and counties? Or is this an addition to it?
My apologies, Chairman Burkhart. Chairman Harshman.
I would leave that up to the body, but I would think that that would go away. I mean, we're the appropriations, but if that kicked in, then that's the idea, that if we're going to try to stay where we're at right now, but if we have to do this insurance policy, okay, local governments, here's your 5th penny and a vote on the 6th, or your 1st penny and your 2nd. But know fully well, if that happens, our financial situation, we're going to have to offload local governments. And so then we would give them that vote on their 2nd penny by the county commissioners or the people, whatever the county commission chooses. So I hope I answered your question, Chairman.
Further discussion, Chairman Burkhart.
No, thank you.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was very confused, but I think maybe I have it figured out. So using my own community as an example, I was a no, but I think now I'm a huge yes. So in my community, we have the 4 state, we have the 1 local, and we have the optional 1/4 cent economic development. So with this, we would have the additional school, and then we would have, if the 173 passes, then we would have if this passes, we would have the local 1 would become permanent, correct? With an optional county would make the 8th, if I'm understanding this correctly. That would be my question. And then if that's correct, I just want to really encourage an eye on this, because this is not implementing a tax. What this is if I'm understanding this correctly, what this is this is actually giving a toolbox to our communities. They can the people themselves can either implement it and vote on it, yes, or they can overwhelmingly vote no. So all we're doing is giving them the tools to be able to utilize it, whether they want to or don't. And so those are the same people that put us here. If they don't want to tax themselves, they can vote overwhelmingly no. These are the same people. If they don't want a bond, they say no. If they don't want a project, they say no. So they have the power, they have the voice, they have the way to say yes or no. This empowers our constituents. This empowers the people that put us here. So all we're doing is letting them decide, not us deciding for them. So I'm definitely a yes on this.
Thank you. Further discussion, Representative Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I was clear on this until I heard that last testimony. When we talk about making this penny permanent, that's another way of saying we take that decision away from the voters. Am I correct in that understanding?
Thank you. We'll not consider your hands props. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So let's talk about the current 5th cent, like in Natrona County. Our voters have voted that in. That doesn't have to ever go back to the voters again. The law that is seldom used is says the commission can continue to impose that tax once it's voted in. Now, in Natrona County, every few years, we have that vote again. The county commissioners have chosen, hey, let's send this back to the people. That is still in there, right? But this first penny that, what we call now the 5th cent, if this all went in place, would be the 6th cent. That penny is permanent now. But we have an amendment coming to have an opt-out, or it could be sent for a vote as well. But it gives local government, sometimes when you sit in these seats, you got to make hard decisions. You represent people because you still have to have police and firefighters, and you got to have sewer and water, and not everybody understands. There's always more to this story, and that's why you run for office, lose your hair and get beat up, and but you try to do some good and solve problems. And part of that is digging in and knowing the rest of the story and settling in your seat and making tough decisions on taxes. But keep in mind, this 173 that you just passed is trying to turn every lever before a tax. This says, if that day ever happens a tax, we don't want to hurt our communities because they rely on sales tax too. And so we're going to keep their options open as well. That's all we're trying to do.
Thank you. I apologize. I didn't see you made the microphone first. Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a former county commissioner, I can tell you that's a poison pill on and against the amendment. The more that we impose a tax here, a permanent tax, those commissioners back home will never get another tax passed. And in the same breath, we're saying those political subdivision, which counties are political subdivision of the state. At the same time, we're saying we're going to cut funding to you because now you have more options. That's less options. It's important for the people to decide whether they're taxed or not, because they know the needs that they want government to provide, and they're the ones that get to decide whether they pay for it or not. So those 1% optional pennies are very important to the communities as an option, but you can't make the environment so poisonous towards taxation that they lose that option. Thank you.
Further discussion, Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could get the good Chairman of Revenue, would you remind the body how much 1% is worth on sales tax?
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Currently it's about 160 million. About 10% of that is paid by out-of-staters. And our LSO tells us 5 to 15% is paid by the mineral industry. When we're booming, it's 15%. We want drill pipe, right, dropped in Wyoming, paying the sales tax on all those things. We want pipelines, all that stuff. So when the boom is on, it's 15% minerals. It's always about 10% out-of-staters. During this last 6, 7, 8 months, we're told by the Department of Revenue only about 5% was paid by mineral companies. So, but 164-ish million. But here's the thing about sales tax. Your 2x4 gets a little more expensive every year. And sales tax, all these states, they just kind of grows at about the cost of durable goods. And our issue with property tax, price of oil. Some foreign government, if there's an attack on a oil installation, price goes up. We'll see that down the road. You have a price war like we saw last spring. And so you're trying to, and if you look in your data book, shows all these services and what the different revenue streams. Schools only got 3. Right? And most of that's minerals, FMRs and property taxes, and then some license fees on our cars, fines. So really trying to protect the locals. That's what this bill's trying to do. So out of the 3 local pennies, the first one would be permanent. I know our revenue committee's been talking about that, making that 5th local penny permanent. Vote on this one, vote on this one. Any more questions?
Okay, body, we still do have amendments.
And Mr. Chairman, as we close and call for the question on this, I think, talk to your local people. I think your local governments are strongly in favor of this bill. That's what I'm hearing. That's what they're telling me. And that's, so pass this on and we'll keep working it. So please vote aye. Thank you.
Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill number 174 and ask for your, and I'm going to withdraw that amendment at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 174 has been withdrawn. The next amendment for our consideration is Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 to House Bill 174.
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2.
Members, Committee of the Whole Amendment number 2 is to House Bill 174 has been withdrawn. We have one more Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3 to House Bill 174. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3. Members, if you look at the amendment, this just ensures, there's 2 parts to it. At the bottom of the amendment, line 26 of the amendment, it talks about House Bill 173 that this is linked to, and deletes 61 since that's no longer in there. And then it also institutes this same language that's in 173 that this tax, this policy change to local taxation would not take place unless the LSRA drops down to 650 million. So it kind of mirrors these bills together. So there's no confusion.
Discussion. Representative Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, what happens with the LSRA if it bumps back up? Does the tax go away? How long does it have to be below that $650 million threshold before the treasurer certifies those kinds of details?
Okay, Representative Burkhart, or Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a question. Up until this point, I thought I had it all, and now I'm confused. So I guess some more explanation. I don't, I kind of thought, I can go with this. I see the point and all of that. And now it's kind of clawing it back a little bit, basing it on the balance of the LSRA, when I thought we were considering it as a, pretty much standalone away from the LSRA as a way to start moving us towards maybe a more reasonable policy. So I just need some explanation to get it, straight in my mind what we're doing now.
Okay, members, we are on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really, this is to protect it, make it crystal clear to the taxpayer. That first local penny is not going to become a permanent tax unless we're in dire straits. And then we have to institute the school tax, and then we're going to not leave the locals hanging, swinging in the breeze on this deal. So that's what it is. This is insurance policy. for taxpayers. That's how I look at it. Thank you.
Any other discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3? Hearing none. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 3 to House Bill 174, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, the amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Any other discussion on House Bill 174? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just because it hasn't been said, I come from a very large community, right? And so when push comes to shove, the capital city is going to be fine. What this bill does, and it's not parliamentary to talk about a bill coming from the other body, but I think you all know there's a bill that's cutting the $105 million appropriation. And when that happens, if this body goes along with it or cuts it at 10% or 15 or 20, because we can't afford to keep subsidizing, I guess I'll call it subsidizing, local governments at 105 million a biennium. What happens when that money gets cut? Your small towns, right, the smallest municipalities, those under about 200 people, they have no revenue streams. I don't know what they're going to do to continue to exist to pay their city employees. And so, and I haven't heard what the plan is when push comes to shove, and that tax revenue that we are giving our smallest municipalities as part of the model that we have for this 105 million, you cut that 10 or 15%. I mean, your smallest communities in your counties, they're the ones that are going to feel this first. It's not your Caspers or your Cheyennes. It's any community less than, I would say, roughly 300 people, of which about 30, 35 of our 99 municipalities are. Go talk to them, because if they don't get the 105 million distributed right now and we cut it this session, I don't see any other bills out there in place that are going to save them from the dire economic circumstances that are coming. Because most of them, one of their few taxation revenue sources is any type of sales, but not food, obviously. So I talk to your locals. If there's a better way than this, ask them what it is. But if we're gonna do a 10 or 15% cut on that 105 million a biennium, you better have this in place, or you better have another answer, or your small towns are going away.
Further discussion? Seeing none and question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 174 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please stand. The bill has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 112. The reading clerk will read the bill. We'll take a step back. Majority Floor Leader Summers, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And, first of all, I want to thank everybody for the really good debate. And we have to have these good debates and on really difficult subjects like that, and I really appreciate it. So I want to go through my new Committee of the Whole list that's going to extend beyond here. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the next bill would be House Bill 112, then 109, 116, 144, 79, 96, 163, and 151. And then we'll see where we get. And if one member doesn't get here, I may have to pull one out of that, but we'll see.
Thank you. Members, look forward to the continued discussion. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 112. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 112, sponsored by Representative Clausen, lifetime pioneer trapper license, an act relating to game and fish. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 112, Lifetime Pioneer Trapping License, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Hunt, Jennings, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Winter. Representative Newsom, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Flitner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 112 do pass. And I further move House Standing Committee Amendment 1. And I do not want you to adopt it, but I will dispatch with it first. This was my motion, Mr. Chairman, if I may proceed.
Please.
Thank you. And members, this was my motion, and then I got with my good vice chairman after the committee and the good bringer of the bill, and we realized there was a better way. So I would urge you to vote no on the House Standing Committee Amendment 1, and I call for the question.
Okay, question having been called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to House Bill 112. All those in favor of it, please say aye. All those opposed?
No.
Okay, the Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has failed. We are back on the bill.
Thank you.
Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, members of the House, and I will pass the bill on to the good bringer of the bill, the young trapper across the way from the good old Converse County.
Thank you. Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So after 2 of the heaviest bills you'll see this session, this is probably the lightest bill you'll see this session. What this bill does, a constituent came to me and wondered why there was no pioneer license for trapping. And there's pioneer licenses for elk, deer, all of these other things. And he had researched it with the Game and Fish, and they told him to touch base with his legislator, and here we are. So what this bill does, it's very, very simple. And I'll explain the bill and then I'll explain the amendment afterwards if that pleases the chairman. But what this bill does is provides for in statute a pioneer license for those individuals, pioneer trapping license for those individuals 65 and over. What it does is lower the rate from, that have lived in Wyoming for, I need to double check this, I think it's 30 years. There are currently 29 of these individuals in the state of Wyoming that are over 65 and have a trapping license. Is not a big number. Let's see. So what the bill does, puts it into statute that you can have a pioneer trapper's license. There is a provision for a youth trapper's license at $6. The regular license is $43. This lowers the pioneer rate to $20. The reason there was never a pioneer license in it is because the trapping statute is separate from the other statutes that allow for the game statutes. With that, I will move on to the amendment and ask for your favorable consideration on the amendment. So there was some confusion in this bill. It says lifetime pioneer trapping license. And I assume that was because of the lifetime, the 30 years you had to live in Wyoming. There was confusion with the agency that meant for $20, you could have a lifetime license. And I thought that was a little generous. So this removes any reference to lifetime. So if you pass this amendment, it just clarifies the language that's in there that this is indeed for $20. If you're 65 and older, you can have a pioneer license. And I will move the amendment. I will move committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 112 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Okay, we are on the amendment, committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 112. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 112, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, the committee of the whole amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Representative Clausen.
I think it's fairly simple, probably the lightest bill you'll see all session.
Okay, discussion on the bill. Representative Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You members, those of you who were here last year might remember we had a discussion about lifetime fishing licenses last year and whether or not the 30 years needed to be continuous or not. And we passed a change that allowed for an individual who had spent most of his life here, but had left for a certain number of years and then returned back to his home state to qualify for a fishing license. And I'm just wondering if the committee considered that circumstance as you developed this legislation.
Thank you. Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, yes, well, the committee considered it and I considered it with the agency and they suggested to make it conforming, that it was this way, that you just had to reside in Wyoming for 30 years if you'd gone and came back. So yes, it was considered by the agency and it was considered by the committee.
Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and support of the bill. I'm only up here mainly because I promised my aunt that I would do this, but and for those of you who are in committee, you already heard this, but on and in support of the bill and in the spirit of a former family member who's passed away, my would be her husband, my uncle's uncle was a trapper and a lifetime resident of Wyoming, but passed away a month shy of his 99th birthday a few years ago. And with up to just a couple of months before he passed away, he was out running his trap lines every year. And so if he was still around, I'm sure he could benefit from this. But my aunt informed me that his son is now of the age that he would benefit from this. But anyway, in memory of that individual, please support this.
Thank you for that. Any further discussion? Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On in support of the bill. I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. And when I was approached about being willing to sign on, the first thought in my mind was, this is another opportunity for us to be able to encourage young people, grandchildren, and all these young folks that need to get out and enjoy our Western and our outdoors in this beautiful state. And so it was a nice opportunity to be able to maybe encourage those folks to go out and get a pioneer trapping license. But also there's a potential in this to be able to get more of our young people to take their family members out with them, realize what we have, and help to generate more respect and more appreciation in our young people for what we've got going on in the outdoors of Wyoming. So on in support of the bill.
Thank you. Question having been called, all those in favor of Chairman Flitner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that House Bill 109 do pass, or 112 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, House Bill 112 has passed committee of the whole. Good job. Thanks, guys and gals. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 109. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 109, sponsored by Representative Hunt. Local health officers, education requirements, an act relating to health officers. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred House Bill 109, Local Health Officers, Education Requirements, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Flitner, Ottman, Romero Martinez, Stibar, Wharf, Wilson. Noes, Representatives Clifford, Connolly, Hallinan. Representative Wilson, Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Wilson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 109 do pass. I would also move the standing committee amendment, but I will turn the explanation of the bill over to the gentleman from House District 2. And if I can, Mr. Chairman, I will explain the standing committee amendment after he explains the bill.
Thank you. We are on the standing committee amendment. Representative Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I bring to you House Bill 109 and I apologize. Are we on the standing committee amendment?
Correct. It's been moved.
Okay.
Go ahead, Representative Hunt. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I will first explain the bill and then before we move on the standing committee amendment, Mr. Chairman, if that's all right, the good chairwoman of labor has some additional information on that amendment, so I'll let her explain that. But anyway, folks, I bring to you House Bill 109. And as you can see, a fairly short bill. But ladies and gentlemen, all this is doing is expanding the definition of who can qualify as a county health officer. Currently, the only people who are allowed to serve in that position are medical doctors, MDs. And this bill would extend that to a registered nurse, to an RN, and also, as the amendment will show, to physician's assistants. And that was an amendment brought by a good member of the body down the hall who's familiar with this and suggested that be thrown in. But anyway, the reason for bringing this isn't necessarily to the issues that we've been dealing with over the past year. It's brought it to light, but this doesn't have anything directly to do with that. So bear with me here. My main concern in bringing this bill is that our very small counties in particular have very few medical doctors. And to be fair, there's not a residency requirement that goes with being a county health officer, but I think we can all agree we would prefer that these folks come from our communities and from the county if possible. So anyway, that's really all the bill does, and that's why I'm bringing it. It gives a little bit more benefit to local control. It gives these people more options. And you know, in light of what we've seen over the past year, for many years, these folks they've held these positions quietly. There hasn't been a lot of publicity brought to it. Obviously, that's changed. And you know, going back to the small pool, some of the publicity and the pressure that's gone with that, there's not exactly going to be a line out the door for those who might want to sign up for this job. So anyway, I'll stop rambling here, but that is the essence of the bill. And again, Mr. Chairman, I would turn the explanation of the amendment before we vote on it over to the good chairwoman from Labor Health.
Okay, we're on the standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 109. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The standing committee amendment was to insert, as mentioned by the sponsor, physician assistant in addition. So this would be on page 2, line 8, after the statutory citation, or a physician assistant as defined, and that goes on. And then the same place on page 3, line 16, to insert it as well. And let me just clarify there. So when the sponsor, the specific requirement for the nurse would be an advanced registered nurse practitioner. Okay, so that is a nurse who has, as trained in Wyoming, we have either a master's degree or now you have to have a PhD. The physician assistant is also a master's degree prepared person. So this inserts just one other tool for the county commissioners, particularly in the rural communities. I'd be glad to answer any specific questions.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment, standing committee amendment number 1? Okay, having heard the question, all those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 109, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 109 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. There is still another amendment, members.
Okay, good. I was looking for
Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move committee of the whole amendment number 1 to House Bill 109, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Friends, we tried to do this in committee and didn't get it quite done. What we wanted to make sure of is as we expand from a medical doctor to an advanced practice RN or a physician assistant, that any of them had training via some kind of continuing ed in public health, but didn't want to be too proscriptive. So we left it up to the county commissioners to do so. And so what this amendment does is add in that the individual shall complete continuing education in public health as directed either by their local board of health or by their board of county commissioners or municipal governing board. And with that, I'll take any questions, but if not, I'd ask for the question.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 109, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, the amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill, House Bill 109. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor of Chairman Wilson's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 109 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, House Bill 109 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 116. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 116, sponsored by Representative Worf. Concealed carry residency requirement 2, an act relating to concealed weapons. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1 judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 116, concealed carry residency requirement 2, respectfully reports same back to the House with recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Craigo, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Swanitzer. Noes, Representative Yin. Representative Olson, Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My pleasure is that I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, that it do so at the recommendation that House Bill 116 do pass. And I'll turn over the presentation of the bill to the sponsor of the bill, my colleague, who hails from my hometown in the southwest corner of the state.
Excellent. Representative Worf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you House Bill 116, the Concealed Carry Residency Requirement 2 bill. This one's a real simple bill as well. For those of you that may remember, I think it was in 2010 when it was debated. 2011 is what we came up with, what's been referred to as a constitutional right to carry bill. In that bill, non-residents were not allowed the same privilege that we have as residents. They were required, if they were going to conceal carry, to have a permit. What this bill does is it brings the constitutional right carry is expanded to anybody that is a resident of the United States. And it basically brings it in line with most what the other states have done. I thought we were the last of the concealed carry states to do this, but there is one other state that has yet to do that. But I would urge the body's support. I know that a lot of people that come and spend tourism dollars in this state really value the opportunity to exercise their Second Amendment rights. And that's what this bill would do, is afford them that opportunity to conceal carry if they can legally own and possess a firearm. So with that, I'd stand for any questions, ask the body to pass this bill. Thank you.
Excellent. Do we have any discussion on the bill? Any discussion? Question having been called. I wish they were all this easy. All those in favor of Chairman Olson's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 116 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, House Bill 116 has passed Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 144. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 144, sponsored by Representative Brown. Electric vehicle fee updates, an act relating to multi-purpose vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom is referred House Bill 144, electric vehicle fees updates. Respectful report, same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Stibar. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Burkhart?
I move that when the Committee of the Whole rise to report, it do so with a recommendation that House Bill 143 do pass. And 144 do pass. Turn the explanation over to the good representative from here in Cheyenne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we are on House Bill 144, just for clarification. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I can bring you another pretty simple bill here. This bill here was a little bit of a hiccup. A couple years ago, we increased the electric vehicle fee when you buy a vehicle here in Wyoming and it's an electric vehicle. You have to pay $200 to license it. That was the kind of the going rate of the fuel tax at the time and the offset. Well, what I found out is sometimes broad brushstrokes don't work in legislation. And so what we're doing with this electric vehicle fee update is taking out motorcycles and ATVs. This actually came to me from a gentleman that drives his golf cart, and 9 months out of the year, he uses that golf cart out of state. But the county treasurer that he's at charged him the $200 fee because underneath the current statute, it says that he has to be charged that. So all we're doing with this particular bill is just removing out the light duty vehicles that don't really use that much vehicle gas, don't really need to be paying a $200 fee. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative Brown, for the explanation. Is there any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. All those in favor of Chairman Burkhart's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 144 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed? House Bill 144 has passed committee of the whole. Good job, members. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 79. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 79, sponsored by Representative Duncan. Subdivisions, an act relating to real estate subdivisions. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 79, subdivisions, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Air, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Swanitzer. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Swanitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the committee of the whole rise to report, it do so the recommendation that House Bill 79 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I would turn it over to the good Vice Chairwoman of Minerals.
Vice Chairman Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill clarifies the original intent of the Wyoming Statute 185303. That statute exempts certain divisions of land from subdivision requirements imposed by counties, what has become known as the family exemption. In 2019, we changed the ownership from the sale requirements from 1 to 5 to 5 and 10. By changing those requirements, we inadvertently encumbered several property owners being caught in the middle of a transaction, unable to divide or sell their property under this statute. The changes we're making is simply grandfathering in those property owners affected. So please turn to page 2, lines 17 through 20, and then again, starting on line 23 and continuing over onto page 3, line 2. This is where we're adding in the date of February 27th, 2019. That date is actually the date that our governor signed this bill into law. And thanks for the consideration, and please vote aye.
Thank you for the presentation and about the bill. Is there any discussion on the bill? Okay, seeing no discussion on the bill. All those in favor of Chairman Swanitzer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 79 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, House Bill 79 has passed committee of the whole. Thank you for that. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 96. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 96, sponsored by Representative Larson Lloyd. Treatment of animals, an act relating to animals. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 96, treatment of animals, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clifford, Duncan, Air, McGuire, Roscoe, Swanitzer. Noes, Representatives Clausen and Hunt. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman.
Thank you for that. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Swanitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the committee of the whole rise to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 96 do pass. I would further move the standing committee amendment. And let me take that out real quick before I turn it over. If you look in this bill, I would call it somewhat a drafting error inconsistency. The statute anticipates that animal control facilities can't use currently gas chambers or decompression chambers. When the bill was drafted to include any type of carbon monoxide or dioxide, they put that in with a person, not with a facility. And so now it basically, in the bill before you, if you look at Romanet D in 63203, it says a person shall not destroy an animal by carbon dioxide or non-anesthetic inhalant. But when you look at the definition of animal, we're talking any household pet, so including household rodents, hamsters, guinea pigs, and current best practices for some of your smaller rodents and mammals that are household pets do encourage you to use humane ways with carbon monoxide or dioxide. So the standing committee or this committee of the whole amendment, it's a committee of the whole amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Correct,
There
Mr. Chairman. If you,
is
if
no
you'd move,
standing committee amendment. So let me turn that over and I'll do my committee of the whole amendment at the appropriate time. With that, let me turn it over to the good vice chairman of appropriations.
thank you. Members, just so you're aware, there is no standing committee amendment. There's a committee of the whole amendment, and we'll deal with that clerically. Representative Larson, thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we on the bill or are we on the amendment?
Oh.
Bill. Thank you.
We're on the bill.
It doesn't take much to confuse me. I apologize. So members of the House, this is a bill that was brought to me by constituents around the state or citizens around the state who are really work a lot with stray animals and that are gathered, and they try and find homes for them and they work with them. I think they do an amazing job in all our communities, and they come to me and they said that our statutes are a little bit antiquated on the way that animal control facilities can euthanize these household pets, and ask that we update our statutes. Currently, there are some that use carbon monoxide and some other less than humane means of doing that. And what this bill does is it defines what an animal control facility is, which means a public or private facility. And this is important, with the primary purpose of which is to provide temporary care for stray, surrendered, or neglected household pets. A household pet has already been defined, which means any privately owned stray cat, dog, rabbit, guinea pig, hamster, mouse, gerbil, ferret, bird, reptile, amphibian, so on, retained for the purpose of being kept as a pet near in the home. And so, as we know, there are some instances when these animal control facilities have to euthanize one of these animals, and we want it to be done in the most humane way. And so they set up the means of doing that, and they do it with an injection of sodium pentobarbital, which is or a derivative thereof. There was some discussion in committee if that's difficult to get. We hear about it as applied to humans or to pets. Visiting with the good speaker who works with animals a lot, he said it's a commonly used thing for animals. This is important to understand, that if you're a rancher or private citizen, this doesn't apply to livestock. It doesn't apply to what you do in your private home. It's for animal control shelters. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would answer any questions.
Thank you. We are on House Bill 96, the bill. Any further discussion? Chairman Zwan, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would like to move committee of the whole amendment number 1 to the bill. So let me apologize for my procedural error, but let me at least explain why I was confused, because this will be important on third reading. Hopefully you all remember in our online session last month, we had another animal bill that was a committee bill that reorganized all of these statutes. However, this bill was drafted previously to that bill going through. So you will see an amendment on third reading that'll look lengthy, but it's really reorganizational to conform the bill before it moves to the other body to the current statutes that we passed a month ago. And because I couldn't do that in my committee, that's why I'm bringing a committee the whole amendment, and we're going to revamp it all on third reading to make it meet statutory requirements. So again, the reason for the committee the whole amendment is to allow a person to be able to put down usually your smaller pets in a humane way is a best practice for gerbils, guinea pigs, hamsters. If you look on the internet, it'll tell you humane ways without having to, it'll just tell you humane ways to euthanize them. And so the purpose of the bill is really to talk about animal facilities and what their best practices are in the state of Wyoming, both public and private. It's not to penalize individuals for putting down smaller pets in a humane way. And so that's the rather lengthy amendment, but that's really what it does, is differentiate person from animal control facility. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you for that. Moving along, it's 3:30 members, so we're doing a good job. Any other discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 96? Discussion on the amendment? Okay, sensing you're ready to vote, all those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to House Bill 96, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, the amendment has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we've worked a whole bunch in this section of law, and I want to make very clear what this bill does and who it traps and who it makes criminal. So euthanasia is very heart-jerking, but it's a necessary part of dealing with animals. So what this section does is it makes it so a person can still euthanize animals in other humane factions, right? This just applies to facilities, to humane facilities. So animal control facilities, okay? So there are several, I'm thinking close to 20 approved ways to do euthanasia through the American Veterinary, let me get the correct terminology, but through approved methods through the associations that handle this. So what this bill does is narrows to one method, and it operates it imposes a fine for simply the people that own or run these animal control facilities. So I want to be very clear what this bill does, because I think it's a delicate policy choice when you get into these sort of statutes. They're all tearjerkers, but I want to make sure you understand this just applies to those people that are running these facilities. So to me, they are probably the least likely to perform euthanasia in an unethical manner. So I want to make that very clear that this bill isn't, I think I'm going to speak on and against the bill, but I want the body to understand that it applies to the employees of a facility, not just the general public. My argument is they're probably the least likely to violate this. There are several other methods that apply that are approved for euthanasia. This narrows it to one. So everybody understands this issue on and against the bill.
Thank you, members. Moving along, any other discussion? Any other discussion? Speaker Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think the last speaker does bring up a good thing. Clearly, as a veterinarian, someone trained and hopefully practicing ethically, there are more options open. There are approved methods, both ethically and from a medical standpoint, for euthanasia. Sometimes you don't have all the tools, you don't have the ideal tools, but there is still a need, whether it's on a racetrack, or it's in the middle of a pasture, or it's on the side of the road in a catastrophic accident. Those options are still, the practicing individual, the professional, still has all the options on the table. Everything that they would ethically be able to do and medically are trained to do are still there. This only applies to that circumstance within what the bill outlines for household pets. There's terminology in there. This only applies to that for folks that are having to make this difficult decision. I can tell you, as a practicing veterinarian, the worst time of the year is holiday season, because everybody either wants their family to say goodbye to the family pet, or they don't want to have to deal with the challenges that the family pet has when all the kids and grandkids come home. That's the reality that a practicing veterinarian deals with in a general practice. And it's a privilege to be there. It's a privilege, it's a heartbreak, but it's a privilege and an honor. All we're trying to do with this bill is say, we expect folks that also have to make a difficult decision, not in the same time of need, but in the need of practicality. Maybe it's an animal that you can't find an adoption for. And certainly we want adoption. Certainly we want good lives for these animals. We value these pets. But there are times when there may be an animal that is not suitable for adoption, or there is no viable, that can provide the level of care an animal needs. Every ailment that you and I get, an animal has something similar. Diabetes, dementia, all of it. Incontinence, all of it. Those are challenging times. All we're trying to do is find a place where we ensure that it's done as humanely as possible. It doesn't restrict a veterinarian from being involved in using the other tools that would be at their toolbox. It just says when the facility is responsible in this way, let's use the most humane, or at least I would say the highest standard of humanity that's available to them, to the lay person, to the facility, to the people in that. There's no question. I think I hope everybody that has to make these difficult decisions and actually take the actions does it that for the right reasons, not for convenience, not for all those other things, but for the right reasons, and does it in a proper way that limits, if not eliminates, any pain, discomfort, suffering, etc. Not just for the animal, for the pet, but for the people involved. For the people involved. Just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I guess now, a family friend came, said, it's on the weekend, would you help us? And I said, sure. And I have a license to practice, but I don't practice anymore. And I'm just gonna be candid with you. I have all the tools at my disposal, but I'm a little out of practice. And it wasn't as ideal as it could have been for that family and those folks. And I told them, look, I'm gonna do my best for you. And for Scooter, I think. I'm gonna do my best. And they were still appreciative, and it wasn't ideal. But I still did everything in my ability to make that. And that's what we're trying to give these folks is, one, some guidance and the tools I think that are the appropriate tools at the time for the folks that are in this circumstance. So I'd urge your support for the bill. Now, there's no question, there's things we could add to it, but let's get the things that I think are not correct out of the current law. And I would say that's more important than making sure we get all the right things in the law. Let's get the things that I think are inappropriate in the law. And some of what's in this bill does exactly that. So on and for the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're on House Bill 96, treatment of animals. Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if either the good speaker who just spoke or the committee chairman or even the bringer could we've rolled in the committee of the whole amendment. There seems to be a little confusion now because of all that language. So if you could just take a step back and speak to the amendment, just so we have a little more clarity, so we know exactly what's going on before we move on this bill.
Okay, any further discussion? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to kind of reiterate the amendment, I know it looks really lengthy. The problem was pulling out some words out of a statute. And so historically, this statute has dealt with, subsection D has dealt with animal control facilities, and they had prohibitions against using a gas chamber, certain types of engines, gasoline engines. And so when it was drafted, instead of creating a new subsection, they just said a person shall not destroy an animal by carbon dioxide or non-anesthetic inhalants, which is generally a good idea for most of what you'd think of as puppies and kitties, right? You don't want to be gassing, we're talking like you don't want to put a dog in a garage with a carbon monoxide in the car. That certainly is not what we want. But there are humane ways when we're talking about, if you look at household pets in our law, the definitions are dogs, cats, rabbits, guinea pigs, hamsters, mouse, gerbil, ferret, bird, fish, reptile, amphibian, and vertebrates, right? It covers everything. And so the reason I brought my amendment is I didn't want to criminalize anyone for putting down what would be a household pet, but not your normal household pet, like a gerbil, in an inhumane way. I didn't want to make anybody a criminal. So what the committee, the whole amendment did is move that back into animal control facilities. So if you want to take your gerbil into the veterinarian or your, the pound, whatever these facilities include, right? They still have to put down that animal in the most humane way possible, as you see in the statute. But if you do want to do that at home through the use of a carbon dioxide process, it's normally, if you look, the humane way is to use a baking soda and vinegar, and you can look all this up on the internet. I just didn't want, because it was very personal to me, because we did that in my family this year, and I certainly didn't want to be criminalized. So that was the committee, the whole amendment was just to make sure we're talking only about animal control facilities. So any household pet you want to take in an animal control facility, they have to provide it the most humane way possible of euthanasia. And that's really what the standing or the committee, the whole amendment did.
Okay, further discussion for those undecided? Okay, question having been called. All those in favor of Chairman Flitner's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 96 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, House Bill 96 has passed committee of the whole. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Good work, folks. So just to continue on here, the next bill will be House Bill 163, and then House Bill 151, House Bill 136, House Bill 212, House Bill 115, House Bill 120, House Bill 188. And we're going to quit at 5 because tonight there actually is an event with the Wyoming stock growers. So thank you.
All right, members, good job. Let's push on through and do our best work. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 163. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 163, sponsored by Representative McGuire. Federal congressional elections, residency, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 163, federal congressional elections, residency, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Air, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman.
All right, you've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Zwanitzer?
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm moving the committee of the whole rise to report it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 163 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and would turn over the management of the bill to the good Vice Chairman of Transportation and Military Affairs.
Okay, House Bill 163, Vice Chairman McGuire.
Thank you, members of the House. I bring you House Bill 163 and ask for your favorable consideration. There is a handout in your mailbox if you care to take a look at it. I'll be happy to explain it. The issue that this bill is addressing is that every year we have out-of-state people that apply for and run for our single U.S. congressional seat and/or one of our U.S. Senate seats if they are available. And the reason that they do that is because, well, they can. And it's important to us because here in Wyoming, where we have 3 representatives out of 535 total in the US Congress and Senate, that figures out to be 0.0056% of representation. We aren't even 1% when you get back to Washington, D.C. And that's why those seats are so important to us. And the reason that people from out of state can run for them is that the US, well, back in 1787, when the framers of the US Constitution were putting it together, they were putting together the criteria to run for US Congress or US Senate. And they set it out in the US Constitution, Article 1 for the House and Section 2 for the Senate. And they set out the criteria as being age. For the House, you had to be 25 years of age. For the Senate, 30 years of age. You had to be a US citizen if you were in the House for at least 7 years, in the Senate for 9 years, and it, quote, to be an inhabitant of that state when chosen. And so during the discussion, if you go back and look at the historical records, they were arguing for residency requirements of 1 year, 3 years, 7 years, and they couldn't come to an agreement. So they finally just left it up to the states. And there are other parts of the Constitution that weren't completed. That's why we have amendments to the Constitution. And for many years, states drafted their own residency requirements to run for US Congress or US Senate. Typically, there were anywhere from 1 to 5 year residency requirements. Then in 1964, an individual named Pierre Salinger, who was a very interesting individual. He was a trained classical pianist. He was also a very good poker player. He happened to play poker with the President of the United States at that time. And there was a seat that came open in the US Senate in California. And so he applied for and was appointed to that seat in
Point
the
of order.
US.
What's your point?
Mr. Chairman, let's be careful not to use individual names going forward. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what he said.
And I think he's deceased, so I think that we are okay with that. But anyway, I won't use it anymore.
Members
So-
too, if we could, there is a little bit noisy up here. Thank you.
So anyway, this individual was appointed, and that appointment was challenged because he was not a current resident of the state of California. That was appealed, and the California Supreme Court held in a strict reading of the Constitution that California could not put a residency term as one of the requirements to be appointed for Senate for California. After that decision, then several other people around the country appealed residency requirements for their states. And the US Supreme Court, again, in a very strict reading of the Constitution, held that you cannot impose an inhabitancy requirement for US Senate or US Congress. And all of those decisions, I would note, came with very strong dissents. They were all split decisions. But right now, the rule is, and this is rule from court law from the US Supreme Court, that quote, a term of inhabitancy does not incorporate any measure of duration of time. So that's the current law from the US Supreme Court. So what this proposed bill does is it does not require any other residency requirements or impose any other requirements for somebody who's running for Wyoming Congress or Senate. But what it does say is at the time of application or the time of election, you cannot be a resident of any other state or claiming to be the resident of another state or receiving the benefits of residency from any other state. So for example, if we have a homeless person that's hitchhiking across I-80 and they get to Cheyenne and they walk into the Secretary of State's office and they say, I want to apply, I want to run for US Congress, they can, because they are not claiming residency in any other state. And it used to be that they would pay their $200. Now we just passed out of this House, House Bill 148, which if you saw, raised the filing fee up to $750 if it survives. They would pay their $750 and off they can run. On the other hand, if you have somebody who's living in, let's say, California, and they have a house in California and they pay California state income tax, they have a California driver's license, their kids go to school in California, they have a California resident fishing license. Well, at that point, they are by all definitions a resident of California, and they're receiving the benefit of the residency of California. So if you go to page number 4 of the proposed bill, there's a certificate that all of us signed when we applied for or when we ran for our offices. This just is a continuation of that certificate. It says in our cases, we had to be a resident of Wyoming for at least a year. And it goes on and talks about if you want to run for the governor, that's 5 years. And then the next paragraph would be, if for the office of United States Senator or Representative in Congress, I have not at any time when knowingly seeking nomination or election to this office received, claimed, or been currently claiming any residence or the benefits of residency from any other state. So it's not adding anything. It's just saying you can't be the resident of another state. So that's the bill, and I would ask for your favorable consideration. And my apologies for mentioning the name of an individual during that presentation. So thank you.
Okay, members, we have about an hour and 15 minutes left. Any discussion on the bill?
Right.
Chairman Eklund.
I'd be really quick. I might not get a chance to ask this again. It's interesting to me that we can set a time limit for a fishing license or hunting license or whatever within the state of Wyoming. I'm curious, are we certain we can't set a time for residency for a congressional member? And I'm wondering if it could be fit into the bill later, because I think that's appropriate to do.
Thank you for the discussion. Vice Chairman McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reading the Supreme Court cases, I'm quite certain that we cannot set a term of residency. So,
Any other discussion on the bill? Any discussion on the bill? Okay, question having been called. All those in favor of Chairman Zwaniter's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 163 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Okay, House Bill 163 has passed committee of the whole. Excellent work. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 151. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 151, sponsored by Representative Henderson. Rolling stock tax exemption, sunset extension, an act relating to taxation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 3 revenue, to whom was referred House Bill 151, rolling stock tax exemption, sunset extension, respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Gray, Hallinan, Harshman, Henderson, Jennings, Sweeney, Yin. Noes, Representatives Baker, Roscoe. Representative Henderson, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Harshman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report or do so with the recommendation that House Bill number 151 do pass, turn the explanation of the bill over to the good Vice Chairman of Revenue, Representative Henderson.
Vice Chairman Henderson for the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring House Bill 51 and I ask for your favorable consideration. Folks, this is an extension of the 5-year sunset on the tax exemption for rolling stock in Wyoming. This is applying to the funds, the exemption on purchases of repair materials related to repair and rolling stock. In our state, this was last extended in 2015, and it got out of the House with a vote of 56. And what this is down and about is simply 3 things: jobs, jobs, and jobs. And we know in these times, it's so important for the folks to have that paycheck coming in, right? So what does this cost? This is a fair question. This is not without cost. But remember, the net benefit here is much more than the cost. It costs 1.24 million. You can see that on the fiscal note. And the need to pass it now is it expires in July of this year. So that's pretty much the bill. I sent out an information sheet for everybody a couple of times. There's a couple of them that have gone out to you folks, and I would ask for your favorable consideration. Stand by for your questions. If there are no questions, I ask for the question.
Thank you. Thank you for the discussion. Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quick, I want to call for conflict on this one since I do work for the railroad. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, on and against the bill, this is a sales tax exemption. We've got a lot of sales tax exemptions. We are looking at massive revenue declines all across in every category. We've got to make the hard decisions. The only way we keep our our tax rate as low as we can is to tax everything. And so this sales tax exemption for rolling stock just doesn't make a lot of sense. It really doesn't. It costs 1.2, according to the fiscal note, if you take a look at that, it's $1.24 million a year, I believe. Every $1 million matters when we're talking about cutting programs, we've had a lot of hard discussions in the budget about things we had to cut. So on and against.
Further discussion. I apologize. Representative Washington.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, question for the bringer. I see that there, about half of this is borne by the cost of the tax exemption is borne by local governments. I just want to know, does the state reimburse the locals for any of this lost revenue like we do in some of the other circumstances?
Further discussion. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're faced with unprecedented challenges with revenues declining, with our traditional extractive industries, budget cuts, things like we haven't seen, with a global pandemic, stress local businesses. We need to pay attention to those industries that keep value with our economy. This is basically part of the bigger tax policy. So yes, it is an exemption, but that plays a larger important role in some of our tax policies. Some of the advantages are things like economic development, trained employee investment with part of that. The amount of infrastructure in dollars invested into our communities, there's a bigger part of that plays into this. So all we're doing is we're extending this a little further while we have some of these stressing times right now. And so that we don't impact these businesses to have to take bigger cuts than they already are. So that's basically what we're doing right now, is we're just extending the sunset date so that we can ride through some of these cuts.
Thank you for the unique discussion. Representative Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against this bill. Friends, 5 years ago, we were pretty much promised that this would have been that last 5-year period, right? Exemptions are not meant to last forever. They're not. They're used for economic development, to get companies here, right? And to get on their feet, right? 5 years ago, we were asked, give us one more period. And we said, okay. And that's why you had that vote that you did. The 5 years is up. It's time for us to sunset this. On and against.
Okay, moving along. Representative Wharf, were you at the mic? Okay, Speaker Pro Temp Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too rise in opposition of this bill, and a lot like the minority floor leader is these exemptions come in the business and economic development component of the sections. And that's the idea, was to provide a tax break to attract business in. Those tax breaks were not designed to be forever, in perpetuity. And again, I've been here, this is now the third time this has come up since I've been here. And, we hear the same arguments. So we hear this all the time about economic development and our tax structure. And that is if you're bringing in jobs that cost us more on the general fund, what good are we doing with economic development? It's a tough question. And I always answer it by saying, we've got to get enough critical mass, and we've got some of that in certain areas of the state, and we can move forward and have maybe more opportunities. But these exemptions are not meant to be perpetual. They were there to stimulate and develop the economy. And I'll say this, because my hypocrisy does have bounds. There's a manufacturing exemption that my company takes advantage of that's been there far too long. And it has not stimulated or developed any new jobs that has ever been demonstrated to me as the chairman of the Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee. So for that, it's time we start looking at some of these things, folks. Opposition of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. We are on House Bill 151, rolling stock tax exemption sunset extension. Representative Wharf.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I rise in support of this. And those of you that know me know that I am not the person that really likes exemptions. I think the laws should apply to everybody equally, but I think you need to look at the full merits of this. And I know just from my community alone, this is about 100 good paying jobs. Most of these guys are making over $20 an hour. Most of these jobs are available for kids right straight out of high school. They're tech jobs, they're welding jobs, they're jobs that afford a livable wage for these families. And it was pointed out that, you know, it's called rolling stock car exemption. And it's important to understand this exemption can be removed. We can impose a tax on a business that's highly mobile. They can just run everything down the line and they can set up shop in another state that offers exemptions. And what are they out? What we're out is we have 100 people in my community that no longer are going to be paying taxes. They're no longer going to be buying groceries. They're no longer going to have their kids going to school. And more importantly, we have a company that has been very supportive of our community events that's no longer going to be there for our community. One of the things that I think is important, it was brought up in testimony, that this is a service provided for a lot of our industries that are already under attack and assault. This is a tax that could be passed on to the other industries, but do we really want to do that? So that's the options they have. They can either load everything up and go to the next state that affords the same exemptions that we currently get, and the state gets zero benefit from that, or they can pass on that added tax to the industry that's already on its knees right now, the industry that's paid for all the good things that we have in this state. And so I come to you today to urge your support of this. I know most of you share my views about passing on exemptions. Everybody should play equally. But I think it's important to understand the one business I looked has been in my community since 1974. And I think that can't be lost, how much they've benefited my community. I think it's fair to say these exemptions weren't meant to be indefinite. I think perhaps that's something that can be looked at, but I think this is a time when an exemption makes no sense. The business can just be shipped down the line. The state will realize no benefit from this, and it hurts Wyoming communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the non-repetitive discussion. We're moving on. Representative Roscoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was on this, and I do appreciate the views of the last speaker. These jobs are great for Wyoming. But I looked into the economic projections for these companies and for the railroads in Wyoming, and at least the stock charts are just going up. And for our railroads, the stock, when the pandemic hit, and it just took a little dip, and they're way above what they were a year ago, with projections of a 34% increase in the next few years. So I just think that this industry and these companies can take this, and I think that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a tough one for me, but I had a couple of constituents this past year talk to me, and they wanted to know what we're going to do to raise revenue. I live in a different district than a lot of you do, and I recognize that. I've got a lot of people in my district that are employed in the public sector. Okay, school district, city, county, state, it doesn't matter. They're public employees. And I hear all this talk, well, these are good paying jobs. Well, I've lost a lot of good paying jobs in my district too. We've cut government now since 2012. We've been cutting government. Jobs have been falling out of my district. And I've been singing my praises on trying to do what we can to try to keep some of those jobs going, but I also recognize in right sizing government. But when they ask me this question about what are we going to do about raising revenue, I ask them, well, what do you want me to do? Well, do you want me to raise taxes? Well, no, don't raise taxes on me. I can't afford it. Okay. Well, what do you want me to do? Well, I don't know. That's what you get paid to do. I go, man, you're not helping me very much, guys, and it's tough. And one of the things that I started looking at is the list of exemptions that we provide in this state. We provide more exemptions than we do taxes. That's absurd. No wonder we're broke. No wonder we have a problem with our deficit in K-12, our deficit in getting our budget balanced, taking care of our elderly, where we had a discussion on $50 million on taking care of those that are disabled in our state. No wonder. Here's an opportunity right here, right now, guys. We've got one exemption. One exemption. I don't know what it's ultimately going to cost. I don't think anybody can effectively tell you that they know exactly what it's going to cost or what it's going to effectively bring in. We kind of have to wait and see. It's the trials of going through this. But I'll tell you, it's the one thing that I can tell my constituents when I go back out this summer and I start knocking on doors and talking to people, that I made an effort. I didn't raise taxes, okay? But I voted for an exemption repeal on railroad cars. It helped us. Maybe this much, maybe it's that much, I don't know. But it's time we got to start looking at these exemptions more seriously. I on and against the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, members. More members going to the mic. We're going to continue the discussion on House Bill 151, rolling stock tax exemption sunset extension. Chairman Eklund.
Went on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was here. This is the only exemption I can remember being around when we put on, and there were other exemptions placed on it. This is not the company referenced in the southwest corner isn't the only one that's set up to do this. This is a commodity that can roll right out of state. That's been said as well, but that's what we're doing now. We're carefully looking at each exemption and why they were put there. And there were some reasons, pretty good reasons why they were put there. Other exemptions, the exemption on food, one good reason for putting it there is people were traveling out of state where they had a sales tax exemption on groceries. So I think if we look at it, we look at the whole thing, we need to look carefully at why they were put there. This one is put there because it'll remove the industry from the state. And it's a policy decision. Do you want to tax them or do you keep the people around that are employed with pretty good jobs, or do you want to put the remove the exemption and then see if the companies will remain around. This one, it was a good debate. The sunset was placed in, I think, after the bill. It was an amendment, as I recall, and we were going to look at it again. I presumed that we would continue the sunset. We did have more money then, but I think this is one we need to continue on or we'll lose those businesses.
Okay, members, we're still on House Bill 151. Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm on and for the exemption, but I'm on and for the bill because we're putting out 1.2 million, but we're keeping lots of jobs. With jobs comes income, keeps families in Wyoming, and those families are paying back into the severance taxes that are for our children. So I'm on for the bill.
Thank you for that addition. Any other discussion? Oh, Representative Newsom, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for the bringer of bills. Do these particular businesses have any other tax exemptions? And what are those, if so? But I am heartened that the sunset is just moved out, that we're not removing the sunset. And that makes me lean toward the side of liking this bill a little better.
Thank you, Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, one thing to think about this is the bill title is a little misleading where it says rolling stock. This is the repair of rolling stock. It's not the cars themselves, it's the repair. And having that done in Wyoming gives Wyoming people jobs. It also benefits a number of our industries that ship by rail. They lease those cars. Almost all cars are leased. I don't know if you've ever gone out, stood by the railroad tracks and looked and read all the little fine print on a railroad car. It's kind of interesting. Yes, I don't lead a very exciting life, but it's interesting to see what our businesses do and how they do it. So they're leased cars, but the leasee, the person who's doing the leasing, has to maintain them and repair them. And so they do it, they can do it in state. Instead of having a car coming out of one of our coal mines that needs the brakes repaired and sending it to the state to the east, the state to the west, or all the states around us that have exemptions, if we don't, we get it done here, they get the cars back quicker, they're much more efficient. And that's part of this. Now, whether a company would leave the state without the exemption, I don't know. Our good department that handles all of our taxation issues and that, they have a report on this, and it's one of the better reports in there on these exemptions, indicating that the economic benefit of the exemption exceeds the lost taxation, the lost sales tax, excise tax on it. So that's one reason to keep it, to keep our jobs in Wyoming, and that. If you go into the statutes, and I suggest all of you do it at one point, I think there are 50 some different exemptions. A number of years ago, some of the older members remember we had a program, let's go look at all the exemptions and remove them. The result of that was they added 2. We didn't remove any. And I agree. We need to look at all these exemptions. We need to get rid of them. You know, when you have a nonprofit, and I'm not talking about a church, who has 1,000 employees and generates $40 million a year, they get a tax exemption. I think that's something we should look at. And that this is one we should keep. And I seriously mean that. The one on manufacturing, I think we need to take a long, hard look at it, but this one we should keep. There are a lot of exemptions on property taxes, ad valorem taxes, and that. All of those need to be looked at with a real eye towards, are we getting a benefit? And I would tell you, we get a benefit from this, both in jobs and the taxes that those jobs generate indirectly. Those people buy cars, they buy trucks, four-wheelers, and everything that has taxes on them. And frankly, I want those jobs to stay here. Good paying jobs, they're good people that work there. And really, will they leave or not? I don't know. I hate that thing about you don't do this and we'll pack up and go somewhere else. But I'll make an effort to keep them and keep those jobs here, keep the people employed, help our other industries that rely on these rail cars to ship things and that. So on and for the bill, ask you to approve it. And I think maybe we ought to go back to the study of all of our exemptions and look at each one of them. But please don't add any more if you do that.
Thank you. Let's keep the conversation rolling. All right. That's 2. Representative Hallinan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about the jobs of 200, 250 employees to these organizations around the state. And that costs the state of Wyoming about $1 million in taxes. So if we divide that 1 million by the 200, 250 employees, it comes to about $4,000 or $5,000 that we lose for each one of these employees. But you must remember that they all pay ad valorem taxes. They pay sales tax on all the property that they buy, all the items that they buy in the state. And I think it probably comes to more than $4,000 per family. So I don't think this is really costing the state any tax money. So with that in mind, I urge this body to support this bill. I think it's a worthy cause because they can easily move out of this state. And we don't want to lose those jobs, and we don't want to lose those tax dollars that they are paying. For that reason, I urge your support of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, members. Just so you're aware, an update, we've been on this bill for about a half an hour now. So if we want to get some more bills done, let's try to focus the conversation. Representative Larson.
It is Committee of the Whole, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And members, I'd remind you that with the 4,000 or some odd dollars that are generated for each one of these families, we educate their children for $16,000 per child per year. And this is the discussion that we really do have to have, that the good chairman from Minerals brought up. There's no question that all of us pay some taxes, property taxes and taxes on our car, and no food taxes because we've done away with that. And so then we have this robust education system that we spent half the day talking about today, and we're upside down, all of us. And then when we further exempt from sales tax, we're even further upside down. We somehow have got to get some stability under the foundation that supports the services we provide, whether it be education, whatever. Everybody's got to pay their fair share. I don't argue that the jobs are good. I don't argue that the jobs could leave. I don't argue any of that. But why are we exempting them and putting the burden on the industries that are? Should we just exempt everybody from paying sales tax? And I don't know what the question is, but the question is should we vote for this bill? And I would encourage you not to.
Thank you. Further discussion. We are rolling along. Speaker Pro Temp Greer.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, when decisions are made, okay, tax breaks or incentives play into those decisions in the boardroom. For the accountants come out with your rate of return and they look at this. Okay, they make that decision. And when this exemption was first put in place, it was for 5 years. So the decisions to locate here, or the decisions to focus those businesses here, were all made based upon an analysis of that being 5 years in existence. Okay, so that's what they did. So then they located here. And I'm going to tell you the cost of training and relocating and keeping employees is one of the most difficult things an employer can turn into. We've got our employees are here for this. We just need to think about this. If this had been open-ended, a forever exemption, well, one, we wouldn't be debating it for 45 minutes, but two is I wouldn't say this. But the simple fact is, for economic development, the decisions were made and they were made upon the idea that the exemption would be there for 5 years. So we just need to think about that as we vote for it. I'm going to vote no on this. I understand those with these businesses in their communities have a different view on that, but that's why we can't get rid of any exemptions, as none of us are willing to look at the big picture. And I understand that as well. That's why we're all here. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion. We're getting close. Speaker Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So members, I need to apologize to the body for my calling of the question. Actually, I was meant to second the motion I thought I heard for just exempting everything. And the point to that is, Mr. Chairman, is it'd be a lot easier to raise taxes if everybody's exempt. And then we start working backwards. Didn't we hear that earlier? Didn't we hear that earlier? Everybody was exempt and we start working backwards. Maybe we would get to a place where we'd understand where revenue comes from. To the good vice chair of minerals, of appropriations, who used to be on minerals. That's the concern, is we continue to narrow our tax base, making us more dependent on those legacy industries. Now, grant you, I'm going to vote aye, because there's one wide spot in the road on the highway with the 5.9 in it. And it has a diner on one side and a facility on the other side that does exactly this. And I know those folks. And they work in our community and they're there and they're trained. They're professionals. Some of the best welders and craftsmen around. And they're raising their families and working on neighboring ranches, and their kids are growing up in the community and going to schools. I want them to stay there. Right now, they're not fixing as many coal cars, right? Well, maybe we start fixing some of those cars that bring in the big long blades and doing some other things in our communities. And then maybe we get industry that comes in and manufactures something else, for whether it's hydrogen or something else. And we're transporting hydrogen. We're building those cars and repairing that rolling stock here in Wyoming. So it's two different discussions. I get it. The small discussion on the bill is 5 more years or not. The 5 more years might give us some other opportunities with this rolling stock and get some other industry types that would support, this would support other industry types in our state. That's what I'd ask you to think about. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, my apologies to the body for my inappropriate outburst.
Thank you for the clarification. Wyoming, we're doing you proud. Any other discussion? Representative Henderson.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I feel honored to have brought this bill, to have gotten so many folks up. Can you hear me? Okay. I feel honored to have brought this bill and to have gotten so many of our colleagues up and talking about this very important thing. I mean, we've been talking around it all the time. We've been in sessions, right? And so I just ask you to look at the page that I sent you. It's not just about the 1.24 million here. It's about the 500. Gosh, got to put my glasses on. It's about the millions of dollars that are going out through these paychecks and through these purchases to buy the materials to be recycled in our economy, in our communities, right? The good gentleman from appropriations, you know, he and I had a little difference of opinion the other day on Little Town Culture Show Me in it, and whether we wanted to allow something to happen up there. But you know, they have one of the better tank cleaning operations in our state. Down in the Southwest here, we had testimony from a company that has expanded and has expansion on the horizon because of this extension, this exemption. This is only about repair cars. You know, I worked for the railroad when I was growing up here, and I was down here and I'm a journeyman machinist. And this is not easy work. But every time one of these tank cars that you see rolling up and down our rails here in Wyoming carries something in it, well, the federal regulations require that those tank cars be cleaned out and recertified. And what this is about is allowing the opportunity for the businesses to take that time out of service to make improvements so they're safer, more efficient, and so that they're ready to do what the folks in Wyoming along that route need them to do. This is related to jobs. It's one person says 100, another says 231, but you know who's working related to the railroad in your community, just like I do here. These are real people. We're on the same team, right? We're on the same team, right? None of us want to have the inevitability of what are we going to do if somebody turns off our life support system, right? And so we were talking earlier today, as the speaker was saying, about, you know, who gets taxed and why and for what purpose. I think these are all good discussions we should be talking about. But this comes down to a simple decision on our part, whether it makes sense at this point in our state, at this time, in this place, to extend this policy decision for another 5 years. I'm going to vote yes, and I'd urge you to for the following reasons. 231 jobs. It generates a heck of a lot of payroll beyond what the repair purchases are going to generate in terms of sales tax. And that sales tax, by the way, and that revenue keeps other people working. And it also provides another stream of revenue. One of the reasons I got on revenue is that, you know, I want to stop talking about revenue and find ways to generate it. Expand the base, make the base wider so that the people over here in appropriations don't have such a hard job of making all the dominoes line up and fit together, you know, so that we get the right decisions in the right budget for our state. So I'm not going to go up much longer, but there are two questions. One was in the fiscal note on the cost. And, you know, we all have our own perception of the fiscal note, and folks do a real good job putting it together, but it's one piece of the information. And what that has to do with is the percentage that goes, that's incurred, you know, if those dollars aren't distributed to the towns and so forth. That's what that cost is about. But that cost is way offset by the positive things that happen in our state. You know, if the government spends $1, it cycles once, maybe twice. But if people take those paychecks and they make decisions on how to consume and spend those dollars, it cycles over and over and over and over again. And those multiplier effects have tremendous positive impact across our state. And these are positive impacts on the lives of people who don't have any other place to turn to if someone in their family doesn't have a job. That's what I say. To me, it's a no-brainer. I have high regard for my friend here that I've worked with hard on economic development for the last 4 years, and I'll continue working hard for him because he knows what he's talking about. But I take a different decision on this. I come down on the side of people, on the side of jobs, and the side of paychecks. We get those three things going in the right direction, and then we're going to have things happen in our communities the way they're supposed to. So I'd urge your favorable consideration. Sorry it takes so much time.
Sorry, members, we still have more discussion. Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's go ahead and pass this. And in a second reading amendment, let's start decreasing the 100% tax exemption for the next 5 years and start so that it goes away. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Romero Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree with the previous comment with my neighbor to the south. Let's pass it and let's have a discussion through amendment process. Thank you.
Thank you, members. We're on the first hour of this bill. Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, we discussed the option of carbon capture and what it's going to do for the coal industry. And right now, with this exemption, you're probably helping the coal industry more than anything you can do with this exemption. I'm not saying that they deserve to have a break and nobody else does, but if we're going to go out on the limb and do something for the coal industry in Wyoming, the Powder River Basin, I would say we probably better leave the exemption in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other unique discussion? Representative Knapp.
Looks like I'm the last one. Thank goodness. Mr. Chairman, one of the things that's frustrating here is we're in a catch-22. We're in a catch-22 because we make the decisions to come up with these taxes. And like Mr. Speaker said, every industry deserves a tax break. Every industry has jobs. Up in the northeast corner of the state, we've lost thousands of jobs, thousands, because of the tax structure of this state. Maybe they should be exempted. Maybe that would create enough revenue to keep us going. But we can't come up with taxes only to exempt everybody from them. We need consistency. We need to make hard decisions here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to again thank you for every one of you from my heart for this very good debate. I don't like saying at the end of the day. I like saying when the sun comes up tomorrow. When the sun comes up tomorrow, I want to have a positive outlook on our tax policy. And I look forward to continuing the discussion. I ask for your favorable vote. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Question having been called. All those in favor of Chairman Harshman's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that House Bill 151 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed? The chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please rise. Members, please stand still. All those opposed, please rise. Okay, members, the bill has failed 27-30. So having it failed a standing division vote, a roll call vote is required. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Conflict. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Conflict. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 30 aye, 28 no, 2 conflict.
Okay, members, pursuant to House Rule 6-6, House Bill 151, having failed a roll call vote, is indefinitely postponed. All right.
Point of order.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, that only
Point
takes a majority of the committee to hold to pass. Doesn't sound like you have all members voting because of the conflict. 2 votes. So 30 is a majority.
So correction for the record, it doesn't need 31 votes. So the bill will move on to second reading. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 136. The reading clerk will read the bill. Yeah, just for clarification, House Bill 151 passes committee of the whole. So again, members, House Bill 136, the reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 136, sponsored by Representative Yin, inclusive ballot language, an act relating to elections. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 136, inclusive ballot language, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Air, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Zwaniter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move in the committee of the whole rise to report to do so. The recommendation of House Bill 136 do pass or understanding committee amendments, and I turn it over to the good representative from Jackson.
Sorry, members, this is a little busy. It's a little noisy up here. It's 4:30, so we have about a half hour left. Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before you House Bill 136 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, I hope we can get this back on track. This is a very tiny bill. So what happened was in the town of Jackson, we had a town council election. During the primary, there were 2 write-in candidates. Both of them were women. After the primary happened, one of my constituents, a pastor in town, she came to me and she asked, so why in the write-in slot on the primary ballot does it say write his name in the blank space? And I told her I have no idea. So we could fix it. That's what we are in the legislature. So I came forward with this bill and got it through committee, and I bring it to you now. And I do ask your favorable consideration. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, any discussion? Seeing no discussion. Okay, question having been called for. All those in favor of Chairman Zwaniter's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that House Bill 136 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, House Bill 136 has passed committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 212. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 212, sponsored by Representative Provenza. Criminal record expungement revisions, an act relating to criminal procedure. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1 judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 212, criminal record expungement revisions, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Yin, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representative Washit. Representative Olson, Chairman.
Thank you, reading clerk. You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Olson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report it, do so with the recommendation that House Bill 212 do pass. And I further move the adoption of Standing Committee Amendment number 1 and ask for your favorable consideration of that as well. I'll discuss the Standing Committee Amendment and then I'll turn over the explanation of the bill to the good sponsor of the legislation. Standing Committee Amendment number 1, ladies and gentlemen, is a substitute bill. And so if you allow me just a little bit of deference here to kind of explain this, because it's a really unique process and I'm pretty proud of a couple of members for it. So we had 2 freshman members who had 2 bills dealing with expungement and addressing a few different things. But at the end of the day, both of those bills addressed the same statute and the same provision, in addition to a few other things. But so obviously you couldn't have 2 bills in front of you as a body addressing the same statute, the same provision. One simple amendment would spiral that into a little bit of chaos. So what we did with this is we took both bills up together at the same time, and the sponsors of both bills worked together to try to find some compromise based on testimony from the public, which we had over a couple, almost actually 3 days worth of testimony. We kept carrying these bills over to get that testimony in. So in hearing from the stakeholders, associations, I'm not going to say that everyone loves this bill and it's a kumbaya, but what I will say is that for the sponsors and the stakeholders that did get together, we reached a compromise on at least 2 things. And so what the substitute bill does is get rid of everything else out there in the world. We'll call them the bells and the whistles, and it hones into just 2 things. And those 2 things simply are criminal expungement dealing with a misdemeanor offense and criminal expungement dealing with a felony offense. And so there's a period of time in law that you must wait until you can apply for that expungement. If you have a misdemeanor, same thing with a felony. And what this bill does and what the substitute bill does is simply adjust the waiting period. So for a felony, the waiting period in law is 10 years. Under the substitute bill, it's now 5 years. Give you a little bit of context. Under one of the original bills, it was 1 year. So from 10 years down to 1 year. In the other bill, it went from 10 years to 3 years, I think. So we're at 5 years. So it's a weird way to compromise, but that's, so it went up. Misdemeanor, misdemeanor expungement is in existing law 5 years. And now it's sitting at 3 years. One bill didn't address misdemeanors. The other bill addressed misdemeanors, and it was 2 or 3 years. So that's the substitute bill. I'd ask for your favorable consideration of the standing committee amendment, and then I'll turn over the explanation further to the bringer of the bill.
Thank you for the explanation. Any discussion on the standing committee amendment? Seeing no discussion on the standing committee amendment, and since you're ready to vote, all those in favor of standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 212, please say aye. Those opposed? Okay, the standing committee amendment number 1 to House Bill 212 has been adopted. It is a substitute bill. On with the explanation, Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will now turn over the explanation of the bill to one of our newest members from over the hill in the city that is home to our university.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Olson. Just first, before we get, I guess I need to move the bill. I bring to you House Bill 212 and ask for your favorable consideration. I will explain the bill at this time and walk you through it. What is expungement? It's not sponges. It has to do with our criminal justice system. So expungement in statute, what it means is only if you have been convicted of a crime, in this case, if you've been convicted of a misdemeanor or a non-violent felony offense, then you can essentially have your record sealed in some way so that it's not destroyed. The criminal justice system can still get to that, but it's not going to be seen by an employer. So the reason why expungement is important is because expungement allows people to more easily obtain employment. They can get housing. They can perhaps get their gun rights back. It's important in getting folks rights so that they can really reintegrate into the community again after they have served their time, after they have paid all their fines and fees, after they have finished community service, after they have jumped through every other hoop necessary and they've paid their debt to society. So that's essentially what expungement is. And I'll walk you through the bill in terms of what that's doing, and then I'll tell you kind of why these portions are important. So on page 1 of House Bill 212, expungement for restoration of rights, you see that on lines 11 through 14, this is state statute 7-13-1501. This is dealing with the misdemeanor specifically. So this section changes the wait period that someone would be able to file for or apply for expungement from the courts from 5 to 3 years. And then on page 2, subsection A on lines 1 through 4, it's just saying what the limitations of this is. And then on page 2, lines 6 through 11 or 6 through 7 specifically, we are changing that wait period from 5 to 3. You'll see on line 8 that there's a reference to Wyoming statute 7-1-107 subsection B3 that is referring to status offenses, which essentially is crimes that you can't be convicted of for being a minor. So buying tobacco when you're underage. And then on lines 13 through 15, now we're talking about non-violent felony convictions. And then on page 3, we move into, on lines 1, we change that from 10 to 5. And then on lines 4 through 8, that's the applicability section. So this would mean that folks prior to this date would be able to apply for expungement. And it would be effective on July 1st, 2021. Before we open up the bill for discussion, I just want to say that expungement can be beneficial for folks to get access to jobs and housing. Those are the 2 most important things when we talk about recidivism. So that meaning, are you going to reoffend and end up back in the justice system, which important for the state of Wyoming, because if you end up back in the criminal justice system, you cost a lot of money. It's also just not good for people. But why reduce the wait time? Well, the data supports it, quite frankly. We see that from departments of justice without specific names. We know that people likely are going to, if they're going to reoffend, they do so in years 3 through 5 after they've been released. So by the time that they've done probation, parole, whatever else, they paid their fines and fees, it's often far longer than that 3 to 5 years. And then they've done everything they needed to do. So we're coming back to this to reduce the time so that we can have a better likelihood for people to succeed in their communities, obtain better employment, housing, go to school, all the things that are taken away from them if they have committed an offense and have it on their record. So that is the bill, and I will stand for questions at this time.
Thank you for the explanation. Discussion on House Bill 212, Representative Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few people have asked why I was the lone no vote in committee on this bill. And it comes down to this, that to steal a phrase from our former speaker, embezzlement's a lot like parole. When it works, it's a beautiful thing. But it isn't always a beautiful thing. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is this. When someone receives an expungement and they've turned their life around and they get another job and they're productive, law-abiding citizens, it's a beautiful thing. But if that individual gets an expungement and that criminal record now becomes invisible to future employers, and that individual goes on to victimize that future employer, then it's not so beautiful. And so what we're doing is we're taking nonviolent felons who used to wait 10 years post-conviction before they'd be eligible to petition for an expungement, and we've dropped that back to 5 years. And that does a couple of things. One, we have a large backlog now of 5 years worth of folks who will be filing petitions, and those petitions require background checks. Those petitions require court hearings. At a time when our courts are coming out of COVID, make all those adjustments and so forth. So I'm a little concerned about a deluge of workload, both for that agency that lost some positions yesterday and for our courts. And to top this off, when you think about nonviolent offenders, unlike a lot of our violent offenders, nonviolent offenders tend to commit multiple crimes. They're repeat people, right? Burglars very seldom get caught on their first burglary. Drug dealers very seldom get busted on their first delivery of illegal drugs. These are repetitive offenders. And so there is a chance, and I think it's a substantial chance, that some of these folks will be, repeat offenders, and we will have shifted the cost from the government to the new victims by changing this law as a matter of policy. On the flip side, if someone really has rehabilitated and wants to move on with their life and get their gun rights back so they can go hunting and everything else, right? It's a beautiful thing. So it's a policy call question for us. My sense is that I would rather err on the side of caution, so I was a no vote in committee.
Thank you. Further discussion on House Bill 212, Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just a question for the bringer and any other co-sponsors. What is the process for expungement? So does a judge look over a person's life when they apply for expungement before they're granted this removal from their record? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. Representative Wharf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would urge the body's support. There's a couple points I wanted to make. One of the things that's really important is to understand that the judgment has to be satisfied. And, that includes time served, probation, and restitution. And one of the things that we need to understand is that all of those have to be served. All that has to be satisfied. It does require them to go back to the court where they were convicted. And so they're going back appearing before the judge that sentenced them. Another thing that was not talked about, but it's something that has been confirmed, and that is that any victim gets the opportunity to go to that hearing where that expungement is going to be debated and discussed. So if by chance a victim still feels that there is some reason for that individual not to receive that expungement, they're given that opportunity to make that argument before the court. So I think it's really important. One of the other things that I wanted to touch on, it was brought up in testimony. There's a couple things we need to think about. You know, there's kind of a separations issue here. You have the judicial branch, you have the legislative branch, and you have the executive branch. As a body, we come up with the policy, the executive branch signs off on it, the judicial branch applies that. Now, one of the things that was brought up in testimony was a question. Currently, the law says at least 10 years. This amendment proposes at least 5 years before a felon can have that expunged. And it amends it down to at least 3 years. And I think it's important to understand it's at least, it's not obligatory. So the courts still have the ability to tell them they have to come back. If they need to come back, the courts can still demand that. But it's a reduction from 10 to 5 for a felony, from 5 to 3 for a misdemeanor. One of the things that was brought up was a question about punishment versus rehabilitation. The question was, punishment is defined as the infliction or imposition of a penalty as retribution for an offense, whereas rehabilitation is the action of restoring someone to health or normal life through training and therapy after imprisonment, addiction, or illness. Rehabilitation is an act of restoring criminals to a proper state so they can be active participants in society upon completion of their punishment. My argument to you would be that having at least 10 years before you can get your felony removed, having at least 5 years before you can get your misdemeanor removed, knowing that all these safety nets are still in place. You have to satisfy the judgment that was issued. You have to pay the time, the restitution, and you still have to appear before the courts. The victim still gets an opportunity to testify. And having been somebody that's been victimized by a white collar crime, I can tell you that it is troubling. We had an individual that had always pled the felony down to misdemeanor. We had no idea until we were faced with an embezzlement case against the nonprofit that I ran. And I can tell you that it isn't something I've taken lightly, but I do believe we need to have the ability to get the monkey off the back. I don't think any of us want to continue to punish people that have done wrong. I think we need to afford them that opportunity to get their record cleaned up and become a contributing member to society. And I think this bill does that. So I would ask the body to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see a whole lot of opposition. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak on the bill? Representative Nyman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually did talk to my county attorney about this, and that is something that, I mean, I dearly love to see people get their life back on the road and get things headed in the right direction and be able to get productive and do these things. But a point my county attorney brought up to me, he said, you're probably not going to hear a lot about the victim in the conversation. He said, if you've been embezzled from, he said, go back and talk to the family or the guy or the gal that lost their business possibly. And he said, he thinks it's a responsibility of that person to bear that. He said, because as we continue to lower this time that we hold people accountable for their actions, he said it kind of takes away from the whole incentive not to do these things. And so it's not that we don't want to see people get their lives back on the right track and stuff, but you know, he said, you got to remember, he said, there's people that got a felony is something that they were badly damaged. And he said that carries weight and that carries responsibility. And as we lower and lower and lower that bar in an effort to try to take away that and get them back on going, he said a lot of times the victims of those crimes are not really considered in this. And so something to consider while you're thinking about this.
Thank you. Further discussion on House Bill 212? Representative Romero Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be brief. I'm on and in favor. I think this compromise addresses disparities in the criminal justice system, and it moves the needle in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for discussion on House Bill 212? Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, colleagues. I appreciate the questions. There was a question from my colleague in where the land of the Pointy Mountains are in District 1 about this process. I will say that my good colleague from District 49 did a really good job of covering that. Someone would have to apply, they pay to apply for expungement. It goes to that district court judge, the prosecutor is involved. There's time for victims to be made aware of it. They get to comment and say things in for or against the expungement. And then the county attorney can also appeal if an expungement is made. So there's room for victims in this scenario. And, I'll say maybe someone's going to mess up again, maybe, but they're more likely to if we make sure that they can't get jobs or housing or education. So I would urge the body to vote for this bill today and allow us to let people who have done their time move on, be contributing to our communities. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for the discussion, members. Question having been called on House Bill 212. All those in favor of Chairman Olson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report to do so with the recommendation that House Bill 212 do pass, please say aye. Those opposed? House Bill 212 has passed. Committee of the whole. Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Hey, the motion carries.
The reading clerk will read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole, having under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. House Bill 173, do pass amended. House Bill 174, do pass amended. House Bill 112, do pass amended. House Bill 109, do pass amended. House Bill 116, do pass. House Bill 144, do pass. House Bill 79, do pass. House Bill 96, do pass amended. House Bill 163, do pass. House Bill 151, do pass. House Bill 136, do pass. House Bill 212, do pass amended. Representative Baker, Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, I move for the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
Members, you've heard the motion on the committee of the whole report. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Congratulations. Well done, Representative Baker. 12 bills, lots of vigorous debate. Sometimes the shortest bills get the longest debate. Messages from the Senate.
Message 214. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 36, for-profit public benefit corporations. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 215, Mr. Speaker, the bills listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 62, extending sunset date for the Office of Consumer Advocate. Ayes 29, noes 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 216, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 96, homicide amendments. Ayes 26, noes 4. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 217, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 106, transportation statutory amendments 1. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 218, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 117, speech and hearing specialist licensing amendments. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 219, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 101, pen registers and trap and trace devices authorizations. Ayes 17, noes 13. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 220, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 102, unclaimed cooperative utility deposits and payments. Ayes 23, noes 7. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 221, Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 110, small claims procedures. Ayes 30. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Reading Clerk. Reports from standing committees.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 171, Executive Branch Funding Restoration. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Walters. Noes, Representative Stith, Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 198, University Water System. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Noes, Representative Schwartz, Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom was referred House Bill 243, State Account Elimination and Transfer of Funds. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Stith, Walters. Noes, Representative Simpson, Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, to whom was referred House Joint 11, State Sovereignty Impacted by Federal Actions. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Banks, Flitner, Haroldson, Hunt, Jennings, Knapp, Newsom, Sweeney, Winter. Representative Flitner, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred House Bill 228, Highway Closure Violation Amendment. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Brown, Burkhart, McGuire, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Stivar. Noes, Representatives Burt and Henderson. Representative Burkhart, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 89 engrossed, Public Utility Safety Lights. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Stivar. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
Thank you, members. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, clears my desk. I'll have a few announcements after your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 12th day of March, 2021.
Committee announcements. Chairman Zawanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions will meet tomorrow at noon, and EO5 to hear the following 2 bills. House Bill 143, Municipal Services Recovery Actions, and House Bill 74, Elected Officials Removal.
Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess to consider the following 3 bills. House Bill 157, Healthcare Professional Education Endowment. House Bill 106, Wyoming Education Options Act. And House Bill 231, College Credit Retention.
Thank you, Chairman Paxton. Any other announcements? Any other announcements? Chairman, oh, I'm sorry, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thought you had amendment, Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 3, Revenue, will have a continuation of this morning's meeting for no more than 1 hour, Mr. Speaker, in East Room 3. And it's continuation of House Bill 168 and House Joint Resolution 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1, the one number 1 in your hearts, Judiciary, will tomorrow at 8 a.m. meet in our usual place of abode to consider House Bill 82, Implementation Requirements for Medical Marijuana, and House Bill 209, Regulation of Marijuana, 8 a.m. tomorrow, and may be continued upon noon recess if necessary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You think it might be. Vice Chairman Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 9. We think we're doing number 240 and 207 and whatever else we get to Friday morning, 8 a.m.
Thank you very much, Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow at 8 o'clock to consider 1 bill, House Bill 249, Railroad Safety.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So I'm going to give a committee of the whole list. We likely won't get to it tomorrow, but it'll at least help you prioritize your bills for reading on the weekend. And so the next bills on committee of the whole will be 115, 120, 188, 156, 229, 193, 236, 165, 164, 166. And then, Mr. Speaker, in all likelihood, if on second reading tomorrow, if we get many amendments on 173, just based upon a budget amendments, we may lay that bill back till Monday for second reading, just so we get through our budget amendments. It all depends on number of amendments for second reading bills and number of budget amendments. So thank you.
All right, members, for tomorrow, as you can see by the clock above and the clock on my screen, the time for turning in budget amendments has passed. So we're right at the 30 mark, approximately. Now we can double that mark if we divide every amendment. I'm not saying we should, I'm saying, so 30 is where we are right now. Based on the time we did yesterday, that's about 6 hours, 6.5 hours of debate. So recall that the motion that the majority floor leader made was for 10 a.m. That means your approval on your amendments must be by 8 a.m. And I want to just kind of get a sense of the room just by standing. Who would like physical copies of the amendments, printed copies of the amendments? If you'd like printed copies, just stand up. I just want to get a sense of the room. Okay, thank you. So we'll make sure we've got 60 copies. That leaves we're not going to print extra copies is my point. So we'll have printed copies. So what we'll do in the morning is we'll take second reading until the physical copies are available on the budget amendments. And then we'll likely lay the remainder of the second reading back until Monday, and we'll start on the third reading budget amendments. Start on third reading of the budget. Any questions about that? Any questions on that? All right, members, you've heard the majority floor leader's motion that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. March 12th, which will be our 19th day of session. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Thank you very much. Good day of work today. Please make sure if you're going to attend, if you've RSVP'd for the reception tonight, please attend those folks that are hosting us tonight. With that, we are adjourned.